Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of our Foreign Press podcast. This one is going to be a little different. This is, of course, our AFPC-USA's collaboration with Arizona State University and the Julianne Wrigley Global Futures Laboratory. But this has some visual components. So this is a part YouTube, part podcast thing. And the podcast will be available on Spotify. And for anybody who wants to watch and listen to the conversation but see visuals, this is going to have the YouTube component as well. And all of that will be made available to you online and will be shared. So thank you again. Today I have here, as part of this initiative, I have Karin Sempf of Innova Nation, and I have Emily Renshaw Smith of Open Planet. Thank you to the lovely Ambassador Amanda Ellis for making this happen. And Emily is the Executive Director of Operations and a board member of Open Planet, which tells stories about environmental challenges and solutions to address the ongoing planetary crisis. And Karin is the founder of Innova Nation, and she is a We Empower finalist. And Innova Nation drives sustainable change through entrepreneurship and education. I'm going to give them the floor to discuss more about what they do. And I'm so happy that you're both here with me today. So thank you both.
Thank you for having us.
So I have some general questions just to start. Karin, if you'd like to go first, how do your programs, right? How do your programs and platforms uniquely contribute to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs? And how do you measure that impact? Can you tell me about that?
Of course. Thank you, Alan, and thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here. So, at Innova Nation, we see the SDGs as a framework, as a living framework, actually, to understand not only the future, but also the present. So we use them as a lens through which our students can analyze the world around them. And that includes climate, that includes technology, that includes health, education, and much more. So we use the SDGs as a way to help our students connect those global challenges to their realities. And more importantly, I would say, is give them a structure and in which they can design a solution. This way, they're not only, they're not innovating randomly, but they're learning to think systematically. They're learning to identify root causes, and they're learning to align their work with long-term goals. So it's really about, what kind of future I want to help build. And about impact, and that's such an important question as well. First of all, the reach and participation. We've trained over 17,000 students from 450 schools, both public and private schools. We've built over 100 national and international partnerships. Actually, just last year, we created more than 12 new alliances that support us with funding, mentoring, workshops, and global opportunities for our youth. And project generation, and that's very important for us because that's where we keep track of the type of projects that our students create. Last year, they created 161 projects in the intersection of sustainability, innovation, and entrepreneurship in industries such as health, tourism, education, energy, agriculture, and technology. And we actually give feedback to those projects as well. So yes, it's different elements of the same type of the impact that we're having within our communities.
Thank you for that. And Emily, would you like to share?
Yeah, sure. So Open Planet is a video library of clips to really support the climate and nature movement with storytelling. And so the SDGs were absolutely front of mind when we developed the platform and the website. Obviously, climate action is very close to our hearts in terms of the kind of specific SDGs that we're focused on. But there's so much intersectionality between all of them. And communication is so much a part, as we see it, of achieving those goals. And our platform is all about supporting campaigners and organizations and governments and communities to create stories which help bring the world along that journey and help us achieve those goals by 2030. In terms of measuring impact, it's really it's always challenging to measure narrative change and the impact of communications, because we all kind of feel it in our bones that storytelling has an impact on us as a human race, that our culture is built on stories, but it's really hard to kind of track the tangible impact of those things, but we do our best. So we can see how many people are downloading clips from our platform, how many people are using those, and which organizations are using them. And we then liaise with those users and content creators and organizations to find out who their audiences are and who they're reaching with the stories they're creating, so that we can measure that tangible impact of numbers of people who are seeing that content and the things they're doing as a result.
That's wonderful. It's so good to know that, well, essentially, like you said that it's a library, right? And at a time when, how do I put this? There's so much misinformation and disinformation out there, sadly, and climate change is, well, we both know, right? That sadly, sadly, when it comes to climate change, there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation. And that is why having projects like these are so important, because we need to keep, sadly, right, again, we're using the word crisis because it is accurate. We're talking about a planetary crisis and we're talking about the climate crisis. But it's important to keep that at the forefront, and having these resources, having organizations like Innova Nation, having organizations like Open Planet, it is essential to, I suppose I would say it's essential to maintain our just our ability to not just survive, but to thrive as a species. We need to be able to engage, in these conversations. Speaking of engaging, right? I'd like to discuss the next generation of leaders, right? There's a new generation of leaders that is redefining what progress looks like, right? In what ways are you seeing this next generation do this? Especially when we look at this through the lens of sustainability and innovation. Emily, would you like to go first?
Sure. I mean, one of our close collaborators is the Earthshot Prize, and we're seeing some incredible kind of innovation and entrepreneurs coming through that project year on year. And we share all of those solutions and all of the footage from the storytelling we've done with those finalists onto Open Planet, so that those solutions can really be scaled effectively. And this generation of leaders, they're growing up with this problem, so they're inevitably going to be more focused and have the tools to be able to achieve the goals that we need in order to achieve the future that we all want to have. But for us at Open Planet, it's really about empowering those leaders, empowering content creators and storytellers with the tools to be able to tell those stories and reach their audiences and bring people with them.
Karin, would you like to share?
Course. No, I agree. I think this next generation of leaders are really redefining what progress is looks like, and they do it through different values of what I can see. First is collaboration. Okay, the inclusion, sustainability. There, young people are asking to be part of the conversation because they care deeply about planet. And technology, but they still need guidance, and they still need the tools. So I think that this generation is able to understand and see opportunities that we're not able to see, and they're being bold, but they still need the training and guidance, and that intergenerational work that we can provide through organizations like ours, it's pivotal for them as well. So yeah.
I'd like to discuss now priorities and goals, right? So we are getting closer. It is 2025. We're 5 years away from the 2030 SDG deadline, right? So what are your top priorities or goals for the next year? Like Karin, where do you see your organization in the next year?
So time flies, right?
Yes, always, always.
Always. We started Innova Nation in 2018. And from day one, we included the SDGs as part of our curriculum. And it seems so distant, but now, deadline is coming in. So, you know, um, understanding what we have done, understanding the impact and the results, we have a couple of priorities. And one of them is understanding that this type of education that's based on experiences, that puts the student at the center of their educational processes, is needed everywhere. Okay, so we are now based in Panama, but we're in conversations to scale regionally. And we're working to expand our programs across Latin America through new partnerships with organizations, for instance, like Space Center Houston or ASU. We're in conversations with the World Scouts Association. And I think this will allow us to bring our model to more young people in the region and understand that this type of education, again, innovative education that complements the traditional system that we usually have in our region is a very much a need. So that's one thing. And the other one is also the strengthening of our curriculum, particularly around two urgent areas. First is, of course, climate education. Since last year, we have included climate as part of all of our programs, and AI literacy as part of all of our programs, because into artificial intelligence is something that we need to understand, both young and not so young as well, and not only to use them but create and use responsibly to drive solutions, and understand that AI needs to be also ethical and human. So we are embedding those topics on all of our learning tracks, whether students are working in health or in education or agriculture or energy. Yeah, that's where we're seeing the results, and that's our top priorities when we move towards this 2030 deadline.
Thank you so much. Emily, may we hear from you?
Yeah, so since launching in autumn of 2023, we've built our platform, we've proved the model, it's out there in the world, and really this year is all about scaling that and reaching new audiences with it. And we're doing that around specific projects. So as well as being a platform, we are also a production studio, and we have a film just released this week, in fact, called Ocean with David Attenborough, which is in cinemas at the moment, which is an incredible feature documentary in David Attenborough's 99th year, all about the history, the last 100 years of the ocean, and also the incredible recovery that's possible in the ocean if we only protect 30% of it. And I'm sure you're aware there's this big target around 30 by 30, so protect 30% of the ocean by 2030. And the film will be doing lots of screenings in advance of the UN Ocean Conference in Nice next month. But then we're also, I think for the first time it's ever been done, releasing a lot of the clips that were filmed for that feature documentary onto Open Planet. And we're really excited to see how that can scale and accelerate the impact that a film like this can have, by allowing other campaigners, NGOs, storytellers, content creators to use that incredible content for their own campaigning purposes, and to really kind of build the momentum around some of the issues raised in that film, which are really around kind of marine protected areas, more governments signing up to fulfill their commitment against that treaty, and also just kind of looking again at our fishing practices, our destructive fishing practices, and thinking about how we can do things differently to protect the ocean. So a project like that gives us an opportunity to really see how Open Planet can have impact in this crucial decade, in this crucial year. And then towards the end of the year, we've got another film that will be coming out all around the importance of biodiversity in nature, and we're hoping to do a similar thing with that project as well. So that's a busy year ahead for us with those two key projects in the pipeline.
Oh, naturally, naturally. I mean, since we're discussing visual storytelling at the Center of Climate Education, Emily, why do you think that images and data visualizations are such powerful tools at this moment in time?
We're very visual people, humans. I think we absorb information we've seen through compelling visuals more readily than we do data and numbers and written information. There are studies that have been done around this, and it's certainly my own personal experience. And as I said before, our world is built on these stories, but we need new ones which help us imagine a future that's possible. It's the way we're going to get there. It's not like we don't know what the solutions are to the climate and nature crisis. We're just not doing them fast enough and at the scale that they need to happen. And that's all about public pressure and behavior change, and us all doing a million different things to make that happen. And I strongly believe, and Open Planet believes, that visual storytelling is a key part of achieving that.
Would you like to show us some of what's on the Open Planet website? I think that's fascinating, and I know that our viewers, our listeners, well, they should, they not only should see this, but I love the idea. I'll just put it this way. When I started learning more about Open Planet, since we're on the topic of visuals, and we mentioned it before we actually started this our conversation, it is a beautifully produced website, right? And I think that I think the word that I would use is it's very it's enticing. It's enticing.
Mhm.
It made me want to know more. And and I mean I'm 34 years old. I think to myself, huh, what would it be like if I was 12, 12 years old? I was a little nerd at 12. Oh, still am, still am. But um when I look back to like my 12-year-old self being nerdy and into science and everything else, like I would have loved to come across, a site like Open Planet. I mean, Karin, wouldn't you agree? I mean, yeah,
Totally,
it's,
completely.
it's fascinating. Um, could you
And
could you show us, Emily? I mean, I personally,
sure, just share the website. So
yeah, it's
yeah, I
just so
mean,
cool
you can
design.
see here on the homepage some of the amazing visual content we've got in the library. We have over 13,000 clips now on the platform, covering all sorts of things around beautiful imagery of our planet. But also some of the issues that we're facing as a planet, and the solutions that we can implement. And so you can search this library for anything that you might want or need to help you with your climate and nature storytelling. And the impetus for this for us was really kind of trying to solve a market failure. Like so many NGOs and organizations had said to us that they were struggling to get access to high quality visual content that they could trust to help them with their storytelling, because the series that get commissioned through Netflix or Disney, the different streamers and broadcasters, when they commission and make these documentaries and series, they're then behind a paywall and expensive to access for ordinary people. So this was really about making those visuals available to as many people globally as we possibly could.
And Emily, since Open Planet aims to, the word I should use here would be democratize right? It aims to democratize access to environmental storytelling. So how do you ensure that Open Planet, that the platform itself reaches educators, that it reaches change makers, particularly in communities that are under-resourced or overlooked?
So, you build it and you tell people about it as much as you can, but you've really got to go out there and do these storytelling projects with communities to kind of help them realize the potential of it. So, we've done two great storytelling projects now with the support of the Wellcome Trust, who really absolutely get the power of powerful communications. And we've partnered with producers. The first project was in Kenya in East Africa. We did a project in Kibera, largest informal settlement outside Nairobi, where we filmed the impact of increased flooding on that community, and also the adaptation and mitigation that was happening in that community as a result. We fully covered that story with lots of footage, and then we gave micro grants to filmmakers in Kenya to use that collection of footage to make their own films, telling that story in their own voice to their own audiences. And that's been so exciting to see. So the filmmakers we partnered with made films that in a completely different style to the ones we would have made. Some of them mixed in animation and spoken word. In fact, there's a fantastic one called The Future of Kibera, where they collaborated with a poet, and it's all about the future that they want to see in Kibera and the history of the community there. And then we've just completed a second one in South Africa. And again, we gave micro grants to filmmakers there to tell a story, a similar story, in fact, of the impact of flooding around Durban. And we partnered with an amazing organization called Sunshine Cinema, who then took those films out into rural communities. They have solar powered cinema kits. They took the films out into rural communities in South Africa and showed the films, and then hosted kind of a community discussion around those films. And the feedback we're getting from those screenings is amazing. Just the sort of intergenerational audiences they brought to those films, the rich conversations that they had as a result about the impact of climate change on those communities, and then the community action that they're wanting to implement as a result. It's, kind of really reframed their approach to climate justice. And so those are the kind of projects that we're doing to try and really take this project to local communities and storytellers, because we recognize how important it is who is telling the story, and that we're much more likely to listen to people who look and sound like us. And so those storytellers based in those communities have a much better chance of having impact and influencing their audiences in their own voice. We also did a fantastic project last year called Planet India, which was to coincide with Delhi hosting the G20. And we filmed with 10 amazing eco entrepreneurs who were all implementing different sustainability solutions in their communities. And then we open sourced all of that footage onto Open Planet, and we had loads of different content creators across India kind of picking that up and turning it into their own content. We also sort of worked with a great organization called People Like Us Create, who train citizen journalists to make films. And we made 10 films, which were then broadcast on Jio Cinema, which is the biggest streaming platform in India. And that reached an audience of over 400 million in the 2 weeks of that campaign. So it's got the power to have scale and reach, as well as reaching those more local sort of specific communities.
Thank you for that. I really love hearing in particular about how you've been able to bridge the gap between, well, particularly with what you mentioned about rural communities, right? That's so important because, and Karin, I'm sure that you have thoughts on this, right? But rural communities themselves, right? They tend to be more, what's the word? More vulnerable right?
Of course.
Yes, more vulnerable to climate change impacts. And then of course there is this crisis of misinformation and disinformation, right? And the very people who stand to suffer the most, who stand to lose the most. I mean, in a previous podcast episode, when I spoke to the Interparliamentary Union in particular, right? We discussed how essentially mostly it was about gender and the intersection between gender and the climate crisis, right? How the climate crisis affects women and girls. But it's fascinating and also heartbreaking to know that there's so much pain currently right now that's being inflicted, all across the global south, or even here, right, where I am in the United States, right, all over rural communities. And these are the people who stand to lose the most. And yet they're not as in the know as they should be. And when you factor in, of course, political will or lack thereof, right? And that's obviously a separate, much longer conversation, probably for another podcast. But it's so complicated, and I just want to thank you before we continue for just engaging in this, right? It's fascinating. Um, Speaking of engaging, I'd like to go to Karin for a moment. Um, we are discussing, of course, young, we were discussing young people, right, in particular.
Yeah.
And Karin, you engage with young people who I'm sure are filled, right, to the brim with so many interesting, really cool ideas. What patterns are you seeing, Karin, in regard to how young people are approaching problem solving and innovation today? And what role would you say entrepreneurship plays in helping these young people not only understand the SDGs, but also build solutions around the SDGs?
Um, it's amazing that we're using the word engagement, because it really starts there. And the patterns that we see with our students, the most consistent patterns that we see is that many of them are initially disengaged from their learning processes and disengaged from climate change. They do not understand it, and it's not something that they feel that they can be part of the solution. So, and I think it's not because they don't care. It's actually the contrary to that, but they haven't been given the right environment to explore these subjects or their potential. So traditional education often underestimates this. And what we have learned along the years is that, as I mentioned before, when you give them training, when you give them guidance, when you start having these conversations about purpose and about the freedom to create, young people come alive. They understand. They're seen. When they're seen and given a space and a platform where their ideas could be understood and taken into account, they thrive. And that's what we want to see, young people that are thriving. So for instance, and I'm going to share my screen, because I also believe in visuals. And Emily, I have to say that I love your work, and I'm a fan of what Open Planet does. And actually, we have one program that's called Generación Planeta, which is planet generation, that's inspired by the Earthshot Prize as well. Our students are creating projects in the 5 missions, and we're talking about young people from 10 and up, creating amazing solutions, because once they understand what's in stake, and of course have that experience, they're able to create those solutions. And just they're very creative. So taking students from these from do you see this picture from?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this is us. This Me and a team last week at Space Center Houston, NASA. This is NASA Space Center, and this is a team that That's called Oxygen. And I'll tell you a bit more about them. But the idea here is to take these kids from here, and let's do a backwards engineering. One sec. It starts with working with them at schools. This is us. I've been participating for the past. We've been participating for the past 4 years at this Global Innovation Challenge. But we start with schools, and we start working with them from early on, so that they can start understanding how to work in projects, and how to create meaningful projects. No, so those patterns, the patterns that we see is that once they understand what they can do through entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship is both a bridge and a spark, because it connects what they're learning in theory to what's happening in the real world. That's the way that they can put in action what they begin to understand and explore real problems, map stakeholders, analyze causes, and really prototype those ideas. Entrepreneurship for us is what brings relevance to what they learn, and they show how they can be not passive but actual actors of change and change makers. But entrepreneurship is also a spark because it gives them a sense of agency. It changes the question to what should I study, to what should I create. So it's really action. Entrepreneurship for us is action, and that's why when actually our first program, up until now, the main program that we have, which is where all of these ideas are created, is entrepreneurship, innovation, and sustainability, because it's in that intersection that they become actual change makers and contributors to society. And maybe I can tell you a bit more about the teams or the ideas that they have created, because they are teams actually. All of these projects are collaborative, and that's important for us because we are aligned to the Educational Framework 4.0, which is set forth by the World Economic Forum. And that means that we are training our students in, first of all, digital skills. They are taken from being passive to active users of technology. Second, and I would say one of the most important skills, are the interpersonal skills, which is based on leadership and collaboration and systems thinking and analytical thinking. So they have to learn how to work in teams, because that's how life is. We all keep continuing to work in teams in our colleges, in our communities, with our families. So that's pivotal to our programs as well. So these projects actually, for instance, Oxygen, the one that we see in our screen, is a machine that was developed by 4 students that produced a medical grade oxygens for hospitals, for low income hospitals, those rural hospitals that usually do not have the same access to the hospitals that are in the cities. So it uses artificial photosynthesis and carbon capture. So this idea was created and developed by 16 and 17 years old. And that's just amazing to see. Another project was Airlux, which was focused on developing a self-sustaining lighting solutions that are powered by a vertical turbine. It's powered by wind energy. And they created this because when they went to the countryside in Panama, they understood that more than 50,000 families in our country do not have access to the electricity grid. So they created this as a way to give an opportunity to families to have energy and to have then a more sustainable, of course, livelihood. So entrepreneurship it's very important for youth. As we always say, entrepreneurial skills are skills for life, actually. Even if you want to be or not an entrepreneur, those are skills you need to develop.
Oh no, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, it's you just shared this is a really wonderful example, right, about people really take in general, right? Human beings, we take the youth for granted. We do. We do. Right? And I've heard so many people say things to me like, "Oh, you know, they're stupid, they don't know anything." And it's like, "Hey, listen, I remember when people were saying that to me when I was a kid, and clearly that's, you know, clearly that well, one, that's wrong, right? And two, I'm awesome, and so are the you know, and so are the both of you. Um, you know, but I mean, I remember a few years back, as a journalist, as someone who is in press freedom advocacy in particular, right? About 6 years ago, I had the opportunity, right, to, and I think I've mentioned this before in another podcast, perhaps around either with this project or with another one with some other people who we've collaborated with in the past. But I had the opportunity to speak at a high school where my good friend of mine was at the time the one of the lead administrators, right? So I spoke about just journalism and verification and independence and accountability and how to just you know, navigate the media environment and just have more media literacy, news literacy, gaining a better understanding of that. And I was in a room with they were seniors, right? So they were 17, 18 years old, well on their way to college, just starting their lives. And they had so many wonderful ideas and so many wonderful questions. And it made me remember, oh, wow, it was really cool, right? When I was that age, and I was just, you know, still am, of course, right? But so inquisitive, right? So inquisitive. And it was fun, right? To just ask so many questions and to self-reflect. And I was listening to them, and I loved how much they engaged with me. And it gave me a lot of hope and a lot of faith, right? Genuinely, it genuinely did. And I think that that's a big reason too why this project, why this collaboration with the Global Futures Lab and with ASU is so important, because we're bridging the gap, right, between journalism and climate education, and we're educating people on all of these cool and interesting things that, of course, that you're doing, Karin, that you're doing, Emily, right, in this case, but it's also letting people see, hey, there are solutions out here. There are people who are involved because the climate crisis, and let's be real here, right? I have faith, right, in so many of the wonderful the thinkers and the change makers who are out there, you know, doing their thing. But there's no denying, right, that the climate crisis has created a crisis of conscience and a crisis of faith among so many people. I mean, you know, you're both on the ground, if you will, right, doing this work, but there's no doubt that it's hard, right? I mean, you know, I do this and I find myself as engaged as I am with this project. I'd be lying to you if I told you that I don't cycle through periods where I think, well, this is, you know, depressing. Like, how do we move forward? But human beings are very good at innovation, aren't they? Right? We seem to find a way moving forward.
Always.
Always, always. Um, Aside from that tangent, forgive me. But the just to get back to the subject of young people, and thank you for those examples, Karin. That is fascinating. Um, just Emily, regarding the youth, if you will, right? How does Open Planet balance urgency with optimism? Right, we're on this topic anyway. In your storytelling, especially when addressing climate anxiety amongst younger audiences. It's such a real thing, and it, you know, and it's heartbreaking, right? I've spoken to young people who are just really struggling with all this. And then at the same time, I see so many who are so into climate justice, right?
Mhm.
And it's wonderful, right? And Open Planet is just, I see it as a really cool and very successful tool that helps people, right? Feel a bit more positively inclined. So can you just share a little bit about that?
Of course. And yeah, I agree with you. It's really tough. I go through the same mental challenges as you do, Alan, with with this work that we all do. I try and hold Christiana Figueres in my mind a lot with the outrage and optimism approach. You know, get very angry,
Yes.
but then try and hold on to my optimism, because I also just am so galvanized by the incredible things that are happening around the world. All of our work that we've talked about today, and that others are doing, it is incredibly positive. And if we're successful with this change that we all want to see happen in the world will be a much better, more equitable, healthy, positive place to be, right? So I really hold on to that. And I also think that there is, in my line of work, there's huge agency in storytelling. So for me, in terms of working with educators and with young people, we talk a lot about helping them control the narrative and having some input into the narrative, because that is a way to kind of feel in control of what's happening, and take some agency in that. We did a lovely partnership with an organization called 1851 Trust recently, which works with young people around communication, and they used clips from Open Planet to help them make films, which was all about use your voice, have something that you want to say about what's happening to the planet, have a message that you want to give out to the world, and use this visual content to do it. And we've just done a similar collaboration with the World's Largest Lesson, which is a SDG project to help young people use storytelling as a way of kind of taking some agency and some control. So for me, it's about, talking about it, discussing it, owning the problem, finding ways through it together, because we know we need to reframe it as an exciting time for human innovation and change, bigger than any that we've been through previously on our planet.
Reframing, I think that's an excellent word. And I also think, and Karin, you brought it up first, but and you just said it, Emily, but agency, right? Agency is so important, because when we're dealing with the climate crisis, we are, I believe, collectively dealing with this feeling as if, we have no agency. And in truth, right, I mean, we are all just, well, to be poetic for a second, right, we're all specks on this rock, right? We're all specks on this rock. And I remember, I believe, interestingly enough, it was the sci-fi writer Michael Crichton, right? Who, and I want to say it was in the Andromeda Strain, right? Which is all about an allegory, right? But for anybody who hasn't read it, essentially these scientists were trying to figure out, well, how do we cure, right? How do we cure? How do we understand this deadly disease that's taking out people worldwide, or that can threaten to take out people worldwide? And one of the things that I found very interesting, and forgive me, Michael Crichton fans, if I'm wrong about this, my memory is a little off, but I remember this one specific thing about, or at least it may have gotten me thinking about it, about how essentially the Earth is, we're looking at billions of years old. All right, it's billions of years old, and in the grand scheme of things, right, and rocks, right, I'll put it this way, right? Rocks are billions of years old, right? And in the grand scheme of things, human beings, right, live anywhere from 75, 80 years old and up, right, on average, let's say. And in the grand scheme of things, I mean, we are but specks, little flashes, right, in the life of this planet, and and in the lifespan of these rocks, right, that are all around us every day. But we still somehow manage to make an impact in this little flash of light that we have, right, in this short time, that we have on this planet. We somehow still find a way to make a difference. And we could, again, right, we've talked about, how depressing it can be. We have a choice here. We could, on one hand, think, well, this is horrible. Look, why am I born at this period, right? It's not like exciting sometimes for me when I do think to myself, why am I, right, like alive right now, seeing everything that's going on with the climate, right? Like, why am I here right at this moment in time, when I could have been born at any other point, right? But at the same time, right, we are right here, right now in 2025, and we are surrounded by so many people who are actively trying to come forward with solutions. And would that have necessarily been doable, 50, 60 years ago? No, right? Considering how much we've grown, how much we've advanced, how much we've come to understand the issues. So I suppose in the grand scheme of things, I may be alive right now, you both may be alive right now, right? But in this little flash of existence that we are enjoying and appreciating, right now, we're actually doing something about it, right? And that is going to make the difference, right? That is going to make the difference for the people that we work with, for ourselves, and for the youth, for the young people who we're talking about. Anyway, enough about that poetry. But I know. No, I mean this project has been fascinating. It does get me thinking a lot, about all of these things. I find it's not an existential crisis, but it's more of I find myself really thinking about my place in the world as I've engaged, with this work, as I'm sure that you both do, right? On a
We do this with love, I think, no? Everyone that is involved in this sort of, work is through love and service and a search of purpose, and the fact that we know that we can, and I think we are fueled by the fact that we can always leave something better than when we found something, no? So it's for me, it's about love and service and knowing that we can do better, and that every child has an immense potential, and that, for instance, yeah. So yeah, it's and I really love your thoughts, Alan, because it makes everything a it helps us put perspective to what we're doing, and helps us get through those very tough days that we all have, no?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. And um in regard to that, right, this the things that help us get through the tough days, right, the information, right? Again, this is a podcast series in this case, right? A little bit of a special thing, considering that we're going to be both on YouTube and on the podcast on Spotify. But since we're bridging the gap between journalism and climate education, I'd love to hear from the both of you, right? What would you say is the most important information that you'd like journalists to take away as a result of your research? Like Emily, for example, right? When you look at and when you think about Open Planet, right? And it's such a wonderful resource. I'm going to live on the website later because I've still been checking it out. It's super fun. But when you think, oh, okay, journalists are going to come and learn about, Open Planet, what is it that you want them to take away from Open Planet?
I mean, it's a fantastic resource for everyone to use to find, incredible footage to tell their stories. But I think what I would encourage your audience and journalists to really think carefully about is how they frame their storytelling, because it's so important that we put out into the world positive, hopeful stories of change, and the incredible recovery and change that is possible if we all pull in the right direction. Because too often we find that, and this is, it's no individual's fault. It's a result of the conditions we're facing as journalists and documentarians and storytellers, in that we've all got smaller budgets, we've all got tighter time frames. But I know some of our partners that we work with in the UK get frustrated when they see newspapers reporting on heat waves in the summer, and they'll have pictures of people sat on Brighton Beach with ice creams in bikinis, enjoying the sunshine. And you think, oh, come on, we've got to think about the sort of deeper impact of these changes to our climate, the more damaging impact on the most vulnerable in society, and what we need to do to help mitigate those challenges. And that's just one example. And there's so much research out there now that some fantastic organizations have been doing, such as Climate Outreach and others, on what makes an effective climate narrative, what are the things that are actually going to make change happen. And I would just encourage your audience to really kind of get up to speed with that, and understand which narrative framings are going to really help shift the dial with audiences around the world. And if I had to pinpoint one specific thing, because we've got our film out at the moment, the Ocean with David Attenborough film I mentioned, so that that's really kind of gathering momentum in the run up to the UN Ocean Conference next month. And so I'm keen for people to share stories around ocean protection and recovery, because there's a real moment and an opportunity here to make change happen in the next few months.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's wonderful. And I need to see it myself. Just putting that out there. And I like your point about what you said about right, like reframing stories, right? So, and there's the term, I may have mentioned it earlier, but solutions journalism. Solutions journalism is so important because there's so much doomerism. There's so much doomerism everywhere, all the time, and it's exhausting. And, Karin, right, you're working with young people who are putting these solutions out there, right? And what is the most important thing that you feel that journalists should take away from the work that you do, that your organization is doing right as we speak?
Well, I would say a couple of things. So, but mainly, first of all, I would love for journalism to tell the story about how youth innovation is. I would say it's not optional. I think it's strategic. Young people are already building real solutions to challenges like climate change, uh, public health, and what they need is platforms, resources, and visibility, which of course, journalists play a crucial shift and a crucial role in this. And the other aspect of this, I would say, is that it would be great also to see how journalism can amplify and support different models of education that break away from the traditional mode of what education is has been. We have to talk about how education could be different and how we can prioritize in creativity that creativity leads to innovation, and how critical thinking and collaboration and real world problem solving is what's needed. The young people need to see that education helps them and will help them in the future, in a near future, that they have even building companies or forming part of the workforce. So I say that journalism can act as a very special. You have a very special role in this.
Thank you. And what is and that's so impactful, thank you for sharing that. And then for the both of you, of course, there is a deficit there, I should say, sadly, but every day there are people trying to bridge the gap between climate change and policymaking, right?
Mhm.
And that is, of course, a much larger conversation. And there are wonderful people out there doing, wonderful work to make things happen. But what would you say are key points from your work that you would like parliamentarians, politicians to take into account as they shape their policies? And what is the most impactful action that you would like to see them inform their constituencies about as a result of your work? Emily, would you like to go first?
I think it's really to have faith that bold climate action will resonate with with voters.
Mm,
We're proving in elections, recently in the UK and I'm sure now currently in Canada and Australia and other places around the world that people want to see bold climate action. We're all concerned for our future and our children's future. And I don't think that politicians believe enough that that is an important issue for voters. It's proved after the last UK election. There was research done that it was one of the top 3 issues that people were voting on. So I think it's having that faith and courage of conviction that it is something that people really care about. And then for us at the moment, it's all about getting behind protecting the ocean, and seeing the real, because that is an issue that can be solved with signing the right agreement and making it happen. It's not about us all taking individual action. It's about us kind of pressurizing those in power to do the right thing.
That's very well said. Pressurizing, I think that's a good word for it. And Karin, what would you add to this?
Yeah, I agree with what Emily said, and to add, I would say I would go back to education. So we have an education crisis
Mm.
in our region, and there's a complete disengagement from the real world to what they're living in their classrooms. It's about having parliamentarians understand this, that you know um, education needs funding, and it needs new visions, a new vision of what is working or not. And just for as an example, I'm a lawyer, actually. I'm a lawyer, a turned entrepreneur, businesswoman, and now my life has, I think I always say I've stumbled into education for the last 10 years. And um, last week, I was given the Innovative Teacher of Award at NASA Space Center in Conrad Challenge. And for me, this is amazing. I can actually see a shift of what no I would say traditional education is. So if we see that in certain places, I think this is something that could be given. That parliamentarians and governments need to understand that this is a type of education that our youth needs. So yeah, that would be. I think that's the most pressing, because that's how we connect with climate change and how we connect with any other crisis that we are currently living right now, and also an education that understand that 21st century skills in the 2025, like 25 years into the 21st century, are not negotiable, and they should be in the core curriculum. Beyond, we need to go beyond memorization. We need to students that learn how to solve problems and adapt fastly.
I think that is a wonderful note to end things on. I'm really grateful for everything that you both shared with me today. It's not lost on me how fortunate I am, right, to essentially get paid to listen to very intelligent people teach me, So yeah, it's very exciting for me as somebody who genuinely enjoyed academia and can just pretend that I'm in class all the time. So it's very fun. And I'm very proud of you both, right, for all that you do and all that you will continue to do. And I would just like to, of course, thank Amanda Ellis and Arizona State University, the Julianne Wrigley Global Futures Laboratory, wonderful partners. This has been such an exciting project. And I'm very grateful to have learned so much about Innova Nation and Open Planet. And I hope that this has been enjoyable for you both today. Is there anything else that you would like to share before we sign off?
Karin, go first.
No, I'm just grateful for this opportunity as well, Alan. It's been amazing to learn more about Open Planet as well. I agree with you. It's great to learn, and one of the things that I try to instill in my students always is that we we need to continue learning. So never stop learning is like the most essential I would say, aspect of what we do, because it's how we keep engaged and updated in what's going on. So I really appreciate the time that we've had, and looking forward for more collaboration, both with you and Open Planet as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. No, absolutely. Um, Yes.
Thank you so much for having me. And you know, it's really fantastic to hear about your work as well, Karin. I totally agree with you about education and where we need to go. And it's really interesting to hear your perspective on all of that. And Alan, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be talking to you both today.